He always sensed when he was being deceived, but he continued to pretend to believe so as not to be alone. And then he realized, loneliness does not begin when you are alone. It begins when the wrong person is nearby. People don't wear masks anymore. They are the mask, polished, calibrated, convincing. The trick is, they believe in their own disguise more than you do. That's why you fall for it. Not because you're naive, because you're human. I used to think I could tell when someone was lying. I studied the tone, the face, the facts. But lies never live in facts. They hide in what's missing, the words that aren't said, the silence that comes half a second too late, the kindness that arrives too fast and disappears even faster. Real deception? It's not loud. It's intimate, familiar, almost comforting. That's what makes it so dangerous. I remember the first time I paid the price for ignoring a pause. Medical school, hospital corridor. A man in his 50s with tired eyes asked me for help. Told me his brother was in the morgue. Said he didn't want him cut open. Religious reasons. I nodded. I felt his pain. I believed his story. I signed the form. The body was part of an active investigation. He wasn't grieving. He was covering his tracks. And I handed him the pen. What broke me wasn't the mistake. It was how easily I made it. It didn't take shouting or pressure. Just a man, a voice, a well-timed pause between two sentences. He looked sincere, but sincerity is cheap when you know what you're doing. That day taught me something that stayed burned into my spine. Anyone can act for 30 seconds, but the truth leaks out in 10. Watch how they blink when you say no. Notice what happens when you stop smiling first. Look at the way their body stiffens when silence drags longer than it should. That's not discomfort. That's control slipping. The hardest part? You'll start seeing it in people you love. That's when it hurts the most. Because you're not just reading a stranger. You're rewriting your past. You'll remember conversations that suddenly feel different. You'll realize the affection you held onto was laced with subtle guilt, with conditional warmth, with something you thought was care, but was really a leash. You don't need to be paranoid. You need to be awake. Everyone's selling something: approval, safety, validation. But the price is always you, your time, your energy, your softness. And when it's gone, they'll just find someone else to believe them faster than you did. Don't wait for betrayal to become your teacher. Train your silence to be louder than your need to please. That's when you start hearing what people actually mean. The next part reveals the one signal manipulators can't fake, and it's not in their voice or their eyes. Most people miss it, and it costs them years. Don't be one of them. You can teach someone to smile. You can train them to sound gentle, to imitate empathy, to speak like they care. But there's one thing they never manage to copy: the way truth waits. A liar rushes. Even when they speak slowly, you'll feel the push, a pressure to make you agree, to make you relax, to make you stop questioning. They need your surrender, and they need it now. That hunger is their tell. You'll sense it, not hear it. It's in how their words arrive half a second too early, like they rehearsed the next move before you finished your sentence. Real honesty breathes. It pauses. It leaves space for discomfort. When someone tells the truth, they don't need to win you. They're not afraid of your silence. They let it exist. That's how you tell who stands in front of you, not by their tone, not by their words, but by the absence of urgency. I once had a patient who lied about her pain for months, not to get drugs or attention, to keep her husband from knowing she was dying. She smiled every time I entered the room, joked, asked about my family. Perfectly convincing. But there was something wrong with the rhythm of her voice. No hesitation, no breath between sentences. It felt performed. One day I stopped her mid-laugh and said, "You don't have to be fine today." She broke instantly, not because of my words, but because I gave her a pause long enough for truth to walk in. That's when I realized truth never fights to be believed. It simply stays, even when ignored. Lies, on the other hand, can't survive stillness. They suffocate in it. You can use this in any room. Watch the tempo. Not the story. The tempo. Someone who wants to control you will fill every gap, flood every silence, keep you busy responding. Someone who respects you will allow a moment of quiet. They're not afraid you'll think for yourself. People often ask me, how can I see manipulation so fast? The answer is brutal. Stop needing people to like you. Once that addiction fades, your sight returns. Because nothing blinds faster than the desire to be understood by someone who's already studying how to use your kindness. The world teaches us to value harmony, to avoid conflict, to smooth the edges. That's how deception survives. It hides in our wish to stay polite. But every time you bite your tongue instead of asking why, you give away another piece of your clarity. Learn to hold silence like a weapon. Don't fill it. Don't save others from it. If they rush to fill it for you, you've already seen their truth. Don't stop here. In the next part, I'll tell you how manipulators turn your empathy into their currency, and why the people who hurt you most often believe they're saving you. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe. This channel's like a quiet voice that tells the truth at the right time. No shouting, no moralizing, just experience that can protect you. And write in the comments, can you recognize a person in 10 seconds? Or maybe you couldn't once, and you still remember that look. Here you can speak honestly. And listen, without fear of being yourself. There's a cruel kind of manipulation that doesn't look like control. It looks like love. It sounds like concern. It feels like someone trying to protect you. That's the most dangerous kind, the one wrapped in care. They don't scream. They don't demand. They gently suggest. They offer helpful advice. They do things for your own good. And slowly, without raising their voice, they rearrange your entire life to fit their comfort zone. I've seen it ruin people, not through violence, not through threats, through guilt. The mother who only wanted the best for you, the partner who just worries too much, the friend who's always there, but never lets you grow without reminding you how much they've done. They never call it control, but it is, because any love that demands your smaller self isn't love. It's a leash. A woman came to me once, middle-aged, smart, kind, exhausted. She said, I don't know who I am anymore. Everyone loves me, but I hate my life. She had spent decades being the good one, the supportive wife, the reliable friend, the respectful daughter. She was dying inside, not from abuse, from slow daily erasure. Not a single person in her life thought they were hurting her, but every single one of them benefited from her silence. That's how you get used, not because they're evil, because your boundaries were raised to be invisible. You were taught to give, not to pause, to listen, not to question, to stay, not to resist. And manipulators, especially the kind ones, know exactly how to spot that in you. They look for soft eyes, for people who hesitate before saying no, for those who apologize when they've done nothing wrong. Then they build a little kingdom around your guilt and call it love. Want to see it for what it is? Watch what happens the first time you say, "I don't agree." If the energy shifts, if the smile disappears, if the support suddenly fades, congratulations. You've just exposed a transaction disguised as a relationship. Real care can handle disagreement. Real closeness survives boundaries. But manipulation, even the sweet kind, cannot. Because it was never about you. It was about control, wrapped in compliments. You were just the tool. Now here's the brutal part. They'll make you feel like the bad one when you pull away, like you're selfish, ungrateful, cold. You'll start doubting yourself, thinking, maybe I was too harsh. You weren't. You were just finely visible, and people who only love the version of you that stayed small won't celebrate your clarity. But you must keep it, because you don't owe anyone the smaller version of you just to keep the peace. Part 4 reveals what happens inside you when you start setting boundaries, and why that sudden guilt isn't weakness, but the signal that you're finally healing. You'll never look at being nice the same way again. Most people don't fear confrontation. They fear the feeling that comes right after it, the guilt, that stomach drop, that rush of, was I too much? That voice whispering, maybe I should have said it softer, waited longer, given them another chance. That's not your conscience. That's your conditioning. You were taught to feel guilty for doing what others weren't ready to accept. But here's the truth they never told you. Guilt is the echo of your old self dying. The self who bent every time someone looked disappointed. The self who smiled through discomfort to keep things easy. The self who thought being loved meant being available. And when you finally step out of that costume, even just a little, guilt rushes in like an alarm. Not because you're wrong, because you're no longer manageable. That's the moment most people give up. They go back to being agreeable, because guilt feels like failure. But what it really is? Proof that you're healing. Let me tell you something that took me half a life to learn. Good people feel bad for doing what's good for them. Not because it's wrong, but because they were trained to see their own needs as selfish. A woman I counseled once said, I told my sister I wouldn't cancel my plans again just because she needed me last minute, and I felt sick for hours. I asked, why? She said, because what if she thinks I don't care? That's the root of it. You're not afraid of conflict. You're afraid of being misunderstood, of someone you love deciding you're not who they thought. But guess what? You were never here to live in someone else's version of you. And the people who need you to feel guilty in order to stay close, they were never close to begin with. You'll start noticing how many relationships rely on your discomfort, how often you're expected to be the one who compromises, how many people love you most when you're tired, apologetic, agreeable. And once you stop playing that role, things start shaking, not because you broke anything, but because you stopped holding up what was already cracked. You will lose people, but you won't lose yourself. Let the guilt come. Let it flood. Then let it go. It's not a warning. It's a detox, a necessary withdrawal from years of emotional overfunctioning. You don't owe anyone the version of you that kept them comfortable, especially if that comfort came at the cost of your peace. In Part 5, we'll talk about the most important silence of your life, the moment when you finally stop explaining yourself, and what happens when you let the world think what it wants and choose not to correct them. That's where your real strength begins. There's a moment in life that feels like betrayal, but it's actually rebirth. It doesn't come with fireworks, no applause. No one congratulates you. It's quiet, almost disappointing in its simplicity. It's the day you stop explaining yourself, not because you're angry, not because you're better, because you finally understand that truth doesn't beg. You will feel it in your chest before your mouth says a word. Someone questions your choice. They tilt their head. They ask, "Why would you do that?" And instead of defending, justifying, softening, you say, "Because I wanted to." No footnotes, no disclaimers, no shrinking. That's when you become dangerous, not to others, but to every system that taught you to shrink. Most people don't want the real you. They want the understandable version of you, the version they can label, predict, manage. So when you stop giving explanations, they panic. Not because you're wrong, but because they've lost control of the narrative. I've seen people stay in soul-crushing marriages because they couldn't find the right words to justify leaving. I've watched women work jobs that drained them because they feared being called ungrateful. I've heard too many say, "I didn't want to disappoint anyone." But every time you explain who you are to people committed to misunderstanding you, you erase yourself just a little more. And the tragedy is, you don't even realize it, because it feels polite, it feels mature, it feels kind. It's not. It's survival in slow motion. Let them misjudge you. Let them call you cold. Let them say you changed. They were never listening. They were monitoring. The people who truly love you don't need a monologue. They feel your integrity in the silence. They trust your no without a reason. They don't punish you for choosing your own peace. But this chapter isn't about them. It's about you. You, learning to sit in that first awkward pause without trying to fill it. You, choosing to leave the text unread without guilt. You, standing firm when everything in you wants to soften for their comfort. You will want to explain. You will want to make them feel better about your growth. Don't. Your evolution doesn't need a spokesperson. There is more power in silence than in the most persuasive speech. There is more clarity in stillness than in 1,000 explanations. And there is more freedom in being misunderstood than in constantly managing your image. Because once you stop explaining, you stop negotiating your worth. And finally, you belong to yourself. The final part is not about strength. It's about peace. What happens when you no longer need to prove, defend, or even speak? When you know, and that's enough. Some truths don't need to be spoken. They settle into your bones. You don't repeat them. You don't post them. You carry them. That's what peace is. Not happiness, not safety, not comfort. It's the quiet knowing, I don't owe anyone anything I had to lose myself to give. People talk about strength like it's something you show. But real strength? It's when you no longer need to be seen, not because you've disappeared, because you've arrived. You stop chasing closure, stop sending long texts to explain what they refuse to understand when you were standing right in front of them. Stop correcting the story they tell others. Let them talk. Let them guess. You're not there anymore. You're not in the room they built with your guilt. And you're not responsible for what they do with the version of you they made up. That's not bitterness. That's maturity. You'll see them one day, maybe across a street, maybe online, maybe never, and you won't feel hate, not even anger. You'll feel nothing, not the numb kind of nothing, the free kind, the kind that comes when you no longer rehearse conversations in your head, when you stop waiting for apologies, when you don't need justice to move forward. You just go, without slamming doors, without grand exits, just out, out of their grip, out of their narrative, back into your own. I used to think I needed to say everything out loud to be free. Now I know freedom is when you choose what's worth saying. And most things aren't. People ask me, how do you know when you're healed? I tell them, when you walk into a room and no longer scan for danger, when you speak and don't replay every word later, when your boundaries don't need tone or defense, just presence, and when someone tries to test them, you don't flinch, you don't raise your voice, you just don't move, because clarity doesn't perform, it just is. You see, the goal was never to win, not to be right, not to convince. The goal was to return to the you who existed before the world told you who to be, the you who didn't apologize for taking up space, the you who didn't flinch every time love came with a price tag, the one who didn't explain her heart to people who had no intention of protecting it. You're not lost. You were buried, and now you're back. You don't need to prove it. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to teach anyone a lesson. The silence is the proof. And you're finally whole. If this spoke to something in you, hold it, quietly. You don't need to rush to apply it. Just sit with it. And the next time someone asks you to explain yourself, don't. Let your peace answer.